Welcome to Gazali. Today we have with us a very interesting personality, Vandana Shukla. She is a poet, she is a storyteller, she is a journalist. She has done her PhD from Banaras Hindu University on partition of India. She has been investigative journalist. She has been handling many very sensitive topics. Right now she is working on Kashmir. Today what we are going to talk about is essentially the partition of India and the stories connected with it. In 1947, English lawyer called Cyril Radcliffe was summoned by Mountbatten to divide India, draw a line and create Pakistan and create India. And just within about 5 weeks' time, this line was drawn. And this was, I think, the partition. This was a line which resulted in the biggest mass migration of humanity in the world, also resulted in the biggest mass killings because of this migration. And now we are here, more than 70 years after what happened. And again, facing the results of it, today with new equations in politics on both sides, perhaps there is hope something will happen. So Vandana, welcome to this program, and basically I would like to hear from you stories connected with partition, which we have been sharing during this morning's walk. So let us start with perhaps which story would you like to start with?
Thank you for inviting me here. Yes, you rightly said, partition resulted in the killing of 2 million people and 15 million people were displaced. For normal people like us, it's beyond imagination what it is like to overnight be thrown away from what you built all your life over. There are so many stories. And the sad part of this whole saga is that these stories remain untold. You rightly observed that 70 years have gone and we have shied away all through these years from addressing these issues because I think we were confused. On 15th August 1947, when India was given independence, we wanted to celebrate it. And the Britishers were so smart, they deliberately delayed declaring the Radcliffe line for 2 days so that this celebration is not disturbed. So on 15th of August, people were jubilant with joy for getting freedom from the British, and on 17th of August, the same British announced that this is not going to be one India and this is going to be the line which will divide families, people, neighborhoods, cities into 2 separate nations. Whenever you draw an artificial line, whether within a family or in a nation, it's going to result in catastrophe, and this is what happened. From those millions of stories, what comes to my mind, because this has never been written, this has never been published, I want to share this story because of many reasons. It's a layered story. It's layered because it reveals how our minds work. You know, the whole structure around partition is that we keep blaming the politicians. We keep blaming the British. We never look at ourselves that why could they do this to us? How could they do this to us? Because something was wrong with us as well. So this story would show what's wrong with us. This story comes from one of the Rai Bahadurs. So I'm not really talking of the riff-raffs, and this Rai Bahadur had a daughter.
Rai Bahadur in Lucknow?
In Lahore.
In Lahore.
Lahore was the culture capital of Punjab. I mean, people were very sophisticated. This Rai Bahadur had a daughter who fell in love with a Muslim. And as they try in all households, they tried their best to dissuade this girl from falling out of love from the Muslim guy. It seems she didn't. She was very serious about this Muslim person. So Rai Bahadur himself sent his daughter to a lunatic asylum. declaring his own daughter to be a lunatic. Now, since I'm here to speak about Manto tomorrow, Manto has written a very famous story called Toba Tek Singh, and this is about the futility of this whole exercise, you know, when two governments exchange the lunatics. The Hindu lunatics in Pakistan side are going to be sent to India and vice versa. When such division actually took place, this Rai Bahadur's daughter was sent to Amritsar. She remained in a lunatic asylum all her life. And Rai Bahadur had assigned some amount of money so that this asylum is looked after well and his daughter is fed and clothed for the rest of her life. The real story begins when she died. The government of India rulings in Punjab are such that when a lunatic dies, because so many times they are declared lunatic to get hold of the property and things like that. So you have to, the person's postmortem has to be done. So the government forced that this woman's postmortem would be done. Now,
which year was this?
This is 2 years back.
2 years back.
2 years
and she
back.
died in a mental asylum in
Amritsar.
In Amritsar, in
Amritsar,
India.
In India. I happen to know this family, very well respected family, I am not going to name them. They came to me and they said, why don't you write about it, you are a journalist, it's so wrong, why do they force postmortem on a dead body, because we went through so much problem, you know, we had to go to DC's office, we had to go to the police officer and we had to wait and it was so hot. And out of courtesy I didn't tell them, but I thought, what about sending your own daughter to a lunatic asylum? What about spoiling an entire life just because your daughter fell in love with a Muslim? So what today we talk about Hindu-Muslim problem, you know, we see communalism as a political problem in its extended form, but where does it breed? It breeds in families like yours and mine. So unless we address these issues, unless we actually look at ourselves, that how narrow we are in our outlook, this narrowness is then exploited by political powers. This happened in 1947. This happened all through these years. If we look at our glorious history of communal rights, I mean from Bhagalpur to Muzaffarpur to Meerut to 84 riots of the Sikhs and the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits in 1990, then Gujarat, it never really ends. It never ends because I feel we are looking at solutions from the wrong end. We want politicians to sort out these things for us. Yes, politicians have to play a very important role.
This morning you had a very interesting analogy which you made between basically dialogues between nations and dialogues between husband and wife.
Yes.
You said dialogues between nations and husband. I think that was a very, very interesting analogy. Can you please talk about it?
Yeah, I think a divorce takes place when husband and wife stop listening to each other. First you stop listening to each other, then you stop talking. You know, in the beginning of my career, I used to be an expert in communication skills and I would go to corporates I was invited to, you know, teach their personnel in communication skills. But at certain point of time, I failed in my own life. And it forced me to analyze what goes wrong when relationships break or when nations stop talking with each other, when armies talk through their weapons of destruction. So conversation and dialogue and debate, these are very, very essential for any civilized society. I feel what we saw in 1947, people like me who had the misfortune of reading it, we were shaken to our roots to see that what humanity is capable of doing to each other. We delete everything that's written by our civilization. By letting, it's wrong to say the animal because animals I think behave in a better way than we have behaved in 1947. If we don't want that to happen again, the only solution is that we talk with each other, we have discussions, and listen to each other. Both communities should be listened to, both communities should listen to each other, both or other communities. I have had this very good fortune of meeting this wonderful person in Ladakh, and I did a book on his life. His name is Bhikkhu Sangasena.
Bhikkhu Sangasena.
Bhikkhu Sangasena, yes. He is doing this remarkable work in Ladakh. It's a very small initiative, but it's very meaningful.
Before you tell me that story, I think our audience should be given a little bit of a background is this. We could talk about partition, we talk about partition in Punjab and also in Bengal. But we forget the Red Cliff line passed through other areas too and through Ladakh. And so there was a partition in Ladakh. So please enlighten us on that.
Yeah, I'll talk about line of control, because line of control passed. What happened when governments decide, in 1947 this happened to us, an artificial line divided people. Punjab is still known to people because Punjab was close to the center of power, to Delhi, and this was a huge exodus. But what happened in Ladakh remains absolutely out of focus. Overnight, LOC was created. Even after partition, what had happened, you know, in October, these people had come from Pakistan and attacked Kashmir. At that point, a few elements in Ladakh, Ladakh was still part of Kashmir under the Kashmir king. One of the generals who was British, he connived with a general in Pakistan, and they decided that let's break up Ladakh. And in October 1948, if I remember it rightly, part of Ladakh went to Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and later LOC was drawn. Now what happened between Ladakhis all their lives had treated Tibet as their center, because they were primarily Buddhist, and they economically, culturally, spiritually, they were associated, their lives dependent on Tibet. Now in 1950 China occupied Tibet, so that gateway was closed to them, but at least this community was one. When LOC became official, what happened? Gilgit and Baltistan, this about 73,000 square kilometer area, went to Pakistan occupied Kashmir.
That's about 20 times the size of Goa.
20 times time of Goa. And this part of Ladakhis, now these became residents of two different countries who are enemies. So their culture, their business, and Ladakhis had never known anything but barter system. Their life, they had never done jobs, you know, like people of us plains. No. So overnight their lives changed, and they had to, the Indian side of Ladakhis had to align with Kashmiris, and Kashmir being Muslim dominated. So their mindset changed. They had never known what is enemy, and overnight these people became enemies, and they had to adjust to a new word, and suddenly this Buddhist Muslim enmity grew in Ladakh, because in Ladakh there are two districts, one is Leh and other is Kargil. Kargil is about 70% dominated by Muslims, 20% Buddhist, and the opposite is in Leh. It's about 70-80% Buddhist and remaining Muslims. A lot of rift developed. I mean, intercaste marriages used to happen earlier. Buddhist women would marry Muslims and vice versa, and it never created a communal right. But because of this line drawn and people becoming enemies overnight, within this community this feeling grew, and in 1992 the Buddhists actually boycotted the Muslims for 2 years. Because there had been, the Kashmiri government also started playing it, so you know, they were going to bring about a land reform, and if the reform would be brought, what would happen? That Buddhists who had traditionally owned lands, you know, the monasteries used to have their own land, and these small patches of land were their source of sustenance. So their fears were also true. So what happens in any such artificial situation when people sitting in Delhi, or what happened during partition, I mean people sitting in London were deciding the fate of a person who is living in a village of Punjab. Similarly, in Ladakh, this happened, that people who had no sensitivity to understand their peculiar geographical and cultural situation were deciding sitting in Delhi and Islamabad how their fate is going to be decided.
So now coming to Bhikkhu. Bhikkhu Sangasena, you wrote the book which is called The Monk Who Postponed His Nirvana. So tell us about how he was able to negotiate through these situations and bring about some changes.
Ladakh, unlike rest of us, has remained very poor. Ladakhis, because of the geographical, they can grow only one crop. Fertile land is very limited. Only army was one window to them, Through army, if you talk to Ladakhis who are mature enough, they would tell you that first time when they saw an army truck, what was their imagination, what it is. When they saw a motorcycle, they called it the flying iron horse, because they had no reference points, Such a backward society is very easily exploited. And this is what Bhikkhu Sangasena, who was a soldier in the Indian army, and he left Indian army because of his Buddhist background, because at certain point he realized that there is no enemy. He thought, who is the enemy? People are like you and me. So he left army and he went into search of a guru. He found his guru in Bangalore. He stayed there for 6-7 years and he learnt a lot about service and Buddhism. And he returned to Ladakh and he lived in a cave, because like a true Buddhist monk, he thought now he should work towards his nirvana. But one day it dawned upon him that what will he do with his nirvana if people are suffering so much? In Ladakh, the temperatures go down to minus 49, 50, and people lose their retina, they lose their eyesight, they lose their eardrums, because of this severe cold. We can't imagine the kind of, ailments they suffer from. So he came down from this cave and he had nothing, being a bhikkhu. Bhikkhu means a bhikshu, you are a beggar, you are living on other people's alms. But he had the passion to help his people. So he started collecting sunglasses from people, and he would put it on a yak and he would take it to the Changtang area. Changtang area is where the nomads live, and it's very backward and very cold. But gradually this is how he kept on, he would take woolens and try to help these people. But working with people, he realized that unless women improve, unless the fate of women, and unless they are educated, nothing is going to change. Like Gandhi believed that, women should be educated. So he started a small school with 10 little girls. And of these 10 girls, one is now the principal of the school there, and this school has about 4,000 children. The beautiful thing about this is that from the very beginning, because we are talking about communal issues, and he saw what was happening to Ladakh. Ladakh, which was the most peaceful land, communal strife was pulling people apart from each other. Societies which have lived in peace, they were learning how to fight against each other. So from the very beginning, he decided that this has to be taught from the very beginning, that we are not a competitive species. We are not here to compete with each other. We have to live in collaboration. We have to help each other. So what he teaches is very beautiful, that you don't grow linear. You don't grow in a pyramid. You grow in a circle.
Yeah, there's a very nice saying about it, that the competition should not be among human beings. Competition should be among horses. We should cooperate.
Yeah.
I mean, now coming to the next story, I think this is a very, very interesting. When you talked about Nal Taranga. I think that's a very, very beautiful, positive story. Can you tell us that story?
Yes, Ustad Alauddin Khan is one of the great masters of Indian classical music. His life story is so amazing that if you read it, you don't believe, like for Gandhi, you know, Einstein had said that after a few generations, people will not believe that such a man really walked on this planet. Same goes for Ustad Alauddin Khan Sahib. And
You were planning to write a book on him.
I was planning to, but as you know, there is no funding in our country for such great stories. You know, all of us have read Van Gogh's story and Lust for Life, you know, and we think it's a great book, but we have so many great stories lying here, and there is no interest by anyone. Anyway, coming to Alauddin Khan Sahib. Alauddin Khan Sahib was a great devotee of Sharda. And there is Saraswati. He lived in Maihar. Maihar is in Madhya Pradesh. It used to be a small riyasat. So there was a temple, and Ustadji would go early morning. First thing he would do is he would go to Sharda temple, would give his prayers, and he named his daughter Annapurna. Annapurna ji is a great artist. She is there, and she married Pandit Ravi Shankar. She was Pandit Ravi Shankar's first wife. So, Ustadji, what he did, you know, he was living in this small riyasat, and they had a topkhana, you know, where they would have their guns and other, you know, weapons. So, he used the discarded rifles. It's called the nal, you know. He took these and he created a beautiful instrument. It's called nal tarang.
Using the nal of the guns.
The nal of the guns. So, when I learnt about this, I thought, what a beautiful thought. You know, I mean, how, if a person, human beings are capable of killing each other, but human beings are also capable of turning a weapon of destruction into such a beautiful, creative piece. So why can't we do the same? If I believe as a storyteller, I believe in telling such stories which are so inspiring and bring out the best in us.
I think that's a very nice observation. I must share a small story about connected with Ladakh and Kargil, which I just came to know from an architect friend of mine who lives in Tibet. And when Kargil happened, part of after the end of the war, part of Pakistan remained with India. And it was Muslim family. And most of the family migrated on the other side, went to the Pakistan side. But one boy, Bechara, he got stranded on this side of the border. Now, there was no way through the official army or other bureaucratic channels that he could be sent back because it's enemy territory. So the Jawans, he got raised by some family there, and the Jawans were cooperative. So they would take a binocular and show him his father's house 7 kilometers away. And he would watch his father 7 kilometers away, but could not go there because he was not allowed to. Ultimately, it took more than 10 years when he grew up that he had to get the necessary visas and everything, and he went to London. And from London, he flew to Pakistan and met his father, who was 7 kilometers away.
This is the absurdity of partition.
This is the absurdity of partition. This is the absurdity of war.
Absurdity of war, yes.
And I basically believe when you rightly analyze things that we need dialogues between countries, like we need dialogues between spouses to save marriages. So now we have a new thing happening in Pakistan. We have a cricketer who is taking over as the Prime Minister. And unfortunately, a man who has actually also started a very interesting dialogue is dead, Atal Bihari Vajpayee. He started the bus, and I met 2-3 people who were on that bus actually, including Sudhindra Kulkarni and Shakti Sinha. They were there on that bus. And hopefully, I think if not through arts, there is a lot of possibility of bringing out this dialogue. But perhaps it can also be done with this ball on the cricket fields. What are your hopes and your doubts about the future of India-Pakistan sort of dialogues for the years to come?
I think people-to-people contact should be revived. That's very, very important. because when people have a very strong opinion, leaders can't deny it. In a democracy, that's the beauty of democracy. And there are actually what V.S. Naipaul talked about, 1,000,000 mutinies. We should talk about 1,000,000 peace initiatives.
Absolutely. I think that's 1,000,000 peace initiatives are needed. And I'm planning one small initiative, which I'm going to present in a peace seminar organized by the American Council in Calcutta next week. And this initiative is very simple. I want thousands of LED screens in primary schools in Pakistan and thousands of LED screens in primary schools in India. And Abdullah from Pakistan during the intermission will have a conversation on the Skype with Mohan from India. And if Mohans and Abdullahs at a very young age start dialogues, then I think we could solve this problem of which is created by the partition. Thank you for joining us, and I think we really enjoyed this conversation.
My pleasure.
Yeah.